All this month, Game Rant is sharing and celebrating our favorite games of 2025. It's going to be a cornucopia of positivity. But today is going to be a little different. No, it's not the worst. Heck, some of these aren't even bad. We're just disappointed, which can sting even worse because that means there were expectations, but these games failed to meet them. Not to single out anyone, but we'll be going alphabetical. But they know what they did. Remedy Games is among one of the most ambitious developers currently working in games. Titles like Quantum Break, Control, and Alan Wake 2 might not be for everyone, but no one can deny they stand out from the vast majority of the industry, let alone other third-person shooters. So when FBC Firebreak was announced as a squad-based first-person shooter taking place in the central location of Control, there was plenty of reason to believe Remedy had cracked the code. Well, the code was cracked alright, the game launched across multiple platforms and services, but everyone agreed the design was confusing and, even worse, it was buggy, making it harder to understand. As in, why did our whole team get wiped out? Why am I on fire? Where are we going and what are we supposed to do? Now, patches have been delivered to remedy this, pun intended, but it only revealed the core gameplay to be relatively shallow, as was its theming and narrative, making the overall experience forgettable, which was the last thing we expected from Remedy. There was a brief period in the summer where Lost Soul Aside began to garner some serious hype, with a fascinating backstory attracting new attention. Turns out this action RPG was something of a dream project by a single developer, eventually snowballing into a final release with an entire team and even Sony themselves publishing. And to be honest, rewatching these trailers, it's almost easy to get sucked back into the idea of Lost Soul Aside being some sort of combat continuation of Final Fantasy XVI, within reasonable expectations, of course. Yeah, that didn't really happen. First of all, Lost Soul Aside is hardly a role-playing game in any regard. You'll get new weapons, sure, but a real sense of progress? Nah, not gonna happen. Call that a marketing fumble, but even the mechanics felt oddly shallow. You could do the moves and they sure look flashy, but they don't feel anywhere as connected or as tactile as they should. But even more alarming, that's the best Lost Soul Aside has to offer, as the story and characters are so stock, so bland, they actively hurt the overall experience. Yeesh. Pretty much everyone got caught in the blast of Mind's Eye. It was a fascinating new third-person open-world game with a futuristic slant. Already that's gonna garner some eyeballs. But from a talent perspective, this comes from Leslie Benzies, one of the most important creators in the game industry this century. Sound far-fetched? Well, he happened to produce and design for every single 3D Grand Theft Auto game until leaving after Part 5. If anyone should know how to make an open-world game, it's him, right? In short, nope. The memes produced from launch week alone tainted Mind's Eye, dropping the veneer of a flashy new game to a sloppy, sketchy, glitchy mess. But in a best-case scenario, the overall design felt sparse and unfinished, and the open world totally pointless with nothing to do. But again, its greatest sin is simply being too boring in its gameplay and pretentious in its story. It's almost impossible to criticize on its own merit because there simply isn't enough here. Was Mind's Eye supposed to be like Grand Theft Auto or Cyberpunk 2077 or something totally new? It's honestly hard to tell. Better luck next time, guys. Now, obviously it's on this list for a reason and we'll get to the issues later, but we want to say Monster Hunter Wilds is a good game, great in some respects, with one heck of a fantastic soundtrack and the latest revamp to the scour and hunt mechanics, which successfully retain the odd nuances fans have come to expect from this classic Capcom franchise. So let's be clear, we like Monster Hunter Wilds. Good? Good. The PC version, on the other hand, we very much did not appreciate, with many Steam reviews bringing up stuttering and performance issues. And that's a real shock when you consider how fundamental the PC crowd has been for the growth of Monster Hunter in the West. But even worse, it feels like the regular tempo of new content fans have come to expect has completely fallen off, with new monsters landing every few months, making it harder to return to. Even more awkward, those streamlined features that help get players out to the fields, yeah, without the surplus of content or new challenges, it makes those refinements feel like a shallowing of the core design. Here's holding out hope Monster Hunter Wilds rolls to safety in the near future. It's a bit unclear what led up to the events of Splitgate 2 being released. Splitgate 1 was a perfectly fine game, attracting a player base with its tight shooting and unique mix of Portal mechanics. It was already a sure thing, so when Splitgate 2 was announced, it was expected some of the rougher edges would be smoothed out, perhaps some missing elements would present themselves. After all, the first game was just fine. Well, Splitgate 2 happened, and despite adding several gameplay-altering features, it felt even less original than the still enjoyable Splitgate 1. In fact, those added features like loadouts and new items really only pushed monetization. Alright, not great, but as long as the new maps are better than the first game, as long as the gameplay is better than the first game, as long as the general tone and feel is better than the first game, all could be forgiven. Instead, Splitgate 2 feels like a cheap knockoff made by someone else. What's more disappointing than that? Tales of the Shire feels like such an obvious idea that we're surprised it didn't already exist. Take that cozy game format familiar to so many and heavily layer on the iconography and storytelling of Tolkien's seminal Lord of the Rings and Hobbit books. Even now it sounds like a slam dunk, but when Steam users saw the rather rotund hardware requirements matched with the relatively modest visuals, it was clear something just wasn't right. Now, far be it for us to declare Animal Crossing an action game, but the actual nuts and bolts of Tales of the Shire is just plain slow and old. Boring design as players wandering around following butterflies towards the next monotonous objective. It's downright sparse with content, but then comes those technical issues like choppy frame rates and objectively dated visuals, making the overall experience so unpleasant you'll need a third and fourth breakfast. Tamagotchi Plaza received a surprising amount of pre-launch attention thanks in large part to its vibrant visuals. Not to mention it's the only Tamagotchi game to come to the West in nearly 2 decades. Heck, most people have long forgotten the handheld virtual pet fad spurred on by Tamagotchi in the 1990s. Surely in all that time, the games have evolved somewhat to meet the modern or near-modern design of shop simulators. Well, even if you haven't been keeping up with the shopkeeper style of games released in Japan over the decades, Tamagotchi Plaza won't give you a good impression of the genre, as hardly anything is explained. Actually, that might tack on an extra 20 minutes of gameplay if you consider that value. Even the simplest components like customization are made needlessly convoluted or hidden. Well, if you know exactly what to do, you'll discover a few super simple mini-games and that's it. Sorry Tamagotchi, but maybe wait a couple of more decades. Let's make one thing very clear about this list. We're not blaming the developers. Some things happen so outside the realm of expectation, all a team can do is work with what they have and try their best. So this is no insult to the Celebrate creators at the Chinese Room, but oh boy, did they walk into one heck of a mess with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. While not exactly a household name, the mythic Bloodlines 2 had lived in the minds of fans for years, if not decades. Obscenely high expectations to be sure, but even the most realistic fans were left scratching their heads when it finally launched in October. It was so obvious multiple teams had compiled this sequel together as assets felt mishmashed. And speaking of which, this doesn't feel like a sequel, like at all. More of an action-tinged mod of some other game, not Bloodlines 2. Can we get a do-over on this title and pretend this never happened? We promise we won't tell if you don't. Either way, it feels like everyone is already done talking about Bloodlines 2 only a few months after launch. Disappointment might be an understatement. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this list, but stick around for some much cheerier content as we chat about the very best games 2025 had to offer. Speaking of which, why not check out this video by yours truly about the very best co-op games of the year? If you and the crew need something to play, you're sure to find it here. Keep clicking around at GameRant.com and we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody.